Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss? And today I'll be looking at the 8th episode of the 2nd season of Star Trek Picard, titled Mercy, and looking for all the Easter eggs and references that you may have missed. The episode begins with a flashback to a child running through the forest, who is eventually come upon by an alien. We learn later that this is a young Agent Martin Wells, played by actor Jay Carnes. This is not the actor's first role on Star Trek, as he also played a Starfleet officer named Duquesne that served on a 29th century time ship in the Voyager episode Relativity. Coincidentally, the class of ship that Duquesne served on was a Wells-class vessel, no doubt named after author H.G. Wells, who wrote the groundbreaking book The Time Machine. The character's first name, Martin, could also be a reference to Martin or Marty McFly, another famous name associated with time travel, as he was the main character of the Back to the Future franchise. Leah Thompson, who played Lorraine Baines McFly in those movies, also directed 2 episodes of Picard this season and was featured in a prior episode. I know a lot of people were expecting this character on Picard to be Duquesne and may be disappointed, but it's more likely that Duquesne is a descendant of Martin Wells. Now that Wells has interacted with some time travelers this episode, I'm sure that this story will pass down through his family and inspire generations, until a man named Duquesne gets a chance to serve aboard a time ship in the 29th century. Also, the fact that Vulcans visited the Earth before first contact has already been established in the Star Trek Enterprise episode Carbon Creek. In that entry, we learn that Vulcans have been studying the planet since at least the 20th century, when a group of Vulcans became stranded here in the 1950s. When one member of the group chose to stay behind on the planet, he said this:
"Perhaps I can arrange for you to be on the next survey ship."
In another 20 years, running more statistical scans from high orbit?
This would mean that another Vulcan survey ship was scheduled to come back to the Earth in the 1970s, which would line up with the events talked about on this episode of Picard, since Agent Wells looks to be a man in his late 50s or 60s and would have been a child in the 1970s. After the intro, we see that Raffi, Seven, and Rios are talking about how to find Agnes. I thought it was interesting that Rios used one of the matches from the prior episode to light his cigar. It's as if each episode has shown Rios becoming more and more comfortable with this time period. After he brought Dr. Ramirez and her son back to the La Serena last episode, I thought that it meant that they would have to come back to the future with them, similar to what happened with Dr. Gillian Taylor in the film The Voyage Home. But after this episode, I honestly think that Rios will want to stay behind and enjoy life with them in this time period. This season of Picard seems to be about characters moving on past their trauma, and Rios has been deeply affected by the absence of a father and the death of a man he built up as a surrogate father, Captain Vandermeer, whose death was shown in the first season episode Broken Pieces. I think that this season Rios will learn that he'll be happier in a life where he's not following anyone, or perhaps just following his heart with the doctor, and choose not to return to the future. Back at the Soon house, Corey becomes anxious and decides to look for evidence as to what her father is doing. Last episode she discovered that she may be a genetic clone, and this gets confirmed in this episode by Q. If you've been watching my videos for this season of Picard, you know that I firmly believe that the Europa mission plotline is a red herring, and that the actual danger to the future is Adam and Corey Soon. This episode seems to further cement that theory, and I'll come back to it later on. But I couldn't help but think that the visor that Corey puts on may be an early version of the visor that Geordi LaForge wears hundreds of years later on The Next Generation. Raffi and Seven find the remains of the man that Agnes met the night before, and in the alley you can see graffiti that says, "Recall Chen." This is a reference to the governor of California during 2024 in the Star Trek universe, and in the Deep Space Nine episode Past Tense, the authorities at the scene of the Bell riots are in contact with a Governor Chen. On the crash La Serena at the Chateau Picard in France, Rios continues to learn more about Dr. Ramirez, and her son Ricardo orders 4 types of cake from the replicator. This is probably a clever allusion to the phrase "let them eat cake," which was coined by the former Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. Agent Wells begins a tougher interrogation on Picard, and I'm sure that it is not a coincidence that the light fixtures in the room contain 4 small light bulbs. This is a reference to the infamous Picard interrogation scene in the Next Generation episode Chain of Command, where Picard refused to be broken by his Cardassian interrogator, and when the man tried to get him to say there were 5 lights in the room, he proclaimed,
"There are 4 lights!"
By the way, if you think that Jay Carnes plays a good cop, then you need to watch him as the character Hutch in the series The Shield. Not anything like Star Trek, but still a great show in my opinion. In another interrogation room, Guinan is being held and is visited by Q. He reveals that he has lost his powers and is dying. But in order to infiltrate the FBI and appear as Rene Picard's therapist a few episodes ago, he still has to have some power left. When they meet, she raises her hands in the same way that Whoopi Goldberg's version of the character did when her and Q saw each other in the Next Generation episode, Q Who. Fans had hoped that we would learn more about these 2 characters' backstory this season, but so far all we learned here is that in the real timeline, they would not have met yet. Corey confronts Adam about his experiments, which he knows now that she is one of. She also recites all the names of the other children that he tried to create that have died, and understands that her name, along with the others, are all just names of the daughter of Zeus. It is interesting that the show decided to name this member of the Soon family Adam, as the name has obvious connections to the biblical figure Adam, or the first created man. But the character Adam Soon doesn't seem to see himself as someone who was created, but rather as a creator or a god like Zeus. This explains how his ego, along with his brilliance, could lead to the dark future that we saw earlier this season. It also explains how even in the real future, his descendant creates life in the form of the android Data, basically bringing the family line full circle. Creating a clever naming convention for his experiments is also a Soon family trait, as the man who created Data, Dr. Noonien Soon, also created the android Lore, who, as his name would suggest, is not as honest as his brother Data. He also created the android B4, who, as his name suggests, was built before Data and Lore. I also want to mention that I think Brent Spiner is doing a fantastic job this season with this character, and I love that he gets to play a role driven by emotion and ego, after playing Data for so many years, who has neither of those traits. It looks like there is a violin at the Soon household, and Data was shown to be fond of playing the violin on the Enterprise D at various times on The Next Generation. Wells finally reveals his past to Picard, as it looks like as a child, he stumbled across a group of Vulcans on a survey of the planet. One of them attempts to mind meld with the boy so that he does not remember them, but the Vulcan is beamed away before it can take effect. During this time period, mind melds were not commonly practiced by the Vulcan people, so it is likely that this Vulcan was not well versed in the technique. The series Star Trek Enterprise explained this evolution of the Vulcan people throughout its 4 seasons, which the ship and crew had a hand in. I love the look that Agent Wells gets on his face after Picard confirms his suspicions about aliens and tells him that he needs his help to save the galaxy. It's what every one of us sci-fi nerds hopes happens to us one day. As Wells starts to leave, Guinan discusses how our fates are connected, and that oftentimes people have to go through things in order to become the person that they need to be. This has obvious allusions to Picard and how he is handling his past, but I think that this is also foreshadowing the coming war on the planet Earth. Even if the future is reverted back to what it should be, the planet will still need to endure a world war that wipes out most of the population. I've been theorizing that we are seeing the beginning of that war with Adam and Corey soon, and that it may tie into the eugenics war that created Khan and his followers, and the last scene of this episode may also be hinting at that coming event, as Agnes finds Adam soon and wants him to stop the Europa mission, but to also help her take over the La Sirena and begin to assimilate the planet. This is technically the 3rd time that the Earth will face the threat of assimilation by the Borg, as in the film First Contact, Jean-Luc and the rest of the crew of the Enterprise E were able to stop the Borg Queen and return to their time period. In another temporal paradox, the Borg ship that was destroyed during this event was found years later in the Arctic by a team of scientists who then became assimilated in the Star Trek Enterprise episode titled Regeneration, and those Borg had to be destroyed before they could send a signal back to the collective. Dr. Soon brings Agnes members of the organization's spearhead operations to assimilate. This is a private military company that was mentioned earlier this season in the episode Fly Me to the Moon, and it was revealed that Dr. Soon had been conducting illegal genetic experiments on these soldiers. In keeping with my theory that these events will lead to the eugenics war, if these soldiers are now being partially assimilated by Agnes, then that would seem to substantiate that a new war is coming with some enhanced soldiers. Since Agnes is a new type of Borg Queen, this partial assimilation may lead to the genetically superior soldiers that begin the Third World War. Well, that was everything I saw this week, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please hit that like button if you have enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?